And tonight he's charged with having and trading a massive amount of child pornography. KIRO 7's Gary Horker is live near the Gates compound in Medina. And Gary, this man worked as an engineer for the family.
That's what SPD intelligence found out, Steve. They found out that the man actually worked for the Bill and Melinda Gates mansion on the grounds of their sprawling 66,000 square foot estate, and that's where they found him and questioned him last March. The estate is behind us, right on the lakefront here, but this is a few blocks away, and it's as close as their security will allow us to get. But according to King County prosecutors, 51-year-old Rick Allen Jones was questioned by detectives about images of child porn and even child rape that were sent from Jones's home computer. Now, none of this alleged crime actually happened at the Gates mansion, but it was here that Rick Allen Jones admitted to detectives he collected child porn for about 10 years, sending images through his Gmail account. Now, while Jones was talking to detectives at the Gates estate, 3 more SPD detectives had a search warrant to search Jones's Ballard apartment. There, they say they found more than 6,000 images of graphic child porn and rape, 133 of which were children identified by police. We tried Jones's apartment for comment. We got no response. We also reached out to Bill and Melinda Gates' foundation, and we did not hear back. So, in fact, we do not know if he's been fired by the Gates' family. Another mystery into this is why Jones was never jailed or charged by these allegations up until now. The investigation started here at the Gates Foundation, the Gates Mansion, in March, and the criminal complaint, which I have right here, says he has to show up in court and face a judge in the coming days. So we're going to keep track of this. We're digging into the charges. We'll keep you posted on the latest. Live from the lakefront in Medina tonight, I'm Gary Horker, KIRO 7 Eyewitness News.
A former advisor to Bill Gates, Microsoft founder, has been named as one of the executors of Jeffrey Epstein's will. And that's not the only weird connection between the Microsoft founder and Epstein. Chief Breaking News correspondent Trace Gallagher joins us tonight for more on this story. Hey, Trace.
Tucker, part of the baffling history of Jeffrey Epstein is how he was somehow able to surround himself with some of the world's most powerful people even after he pled guilty to soliciting an underage prostitute and became a registered sex offender. For example, Prince Andrew was photographed coming out of Epstein's Manhattan mansion in 2010, 2 years after Epstein served jail time. And now we're learning Microsoft founder Bill Gates not only spoke with Epstein on more than one occasion about philanthropic spending, but also flew on Epstein's private plane from New York to Palm Beach, though Gates reportedly refuses to say why. And we should note the plane was not the so-called Lolita Express, which allegedly was used to fly underage girls to Epstein's private island. But still, critics wonder why one of the world's richest men would need to take philanthropic advice from a convicted sex offender, especially considering what Melinda Gates and the couple's foundation does for young women around the world. Separately, a former science advisor for Bill Gates was named as one of 3 executors of Jeffrey Epstein's $577 million will. 49-year-old Boris Nikolic says he was shocked to learn that Epstein named him and says he has no intention of fulfilling the duties. Meantime, Attorney General Bill Barr gave an impromptu news conference today where he maintains that there were numerous irregularities in the death of Jeffrey Epstein, but Barr says so far he has been given no reason to question the findings of the medical examiner who ruled Epstein's death a suicide, though Barr says the investigation is moving forward. Tucker.
What a story. Trace Gallagher, thanks a lot for that.
Fast forward in the timeline to 2015, that is when the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation enters the picture in a big way, because that is specifically when Bill Gates set his sights on the pandemic panic. And we get this from basically a public relations campaign that he started engaging in that time frame, including a Vox.com video where Ezra Klein interviews Bill Gates about what he is most afraid of, and spoiler alert, he's most afraid of a globally spreading pandemic like the 1918 Spanish flu. And at the time, he was also writing an op-ed in the New England Journal of Medicine about the Ebola scare of 2014. Remember that? The big Ebola scare? You're gonna die of Ebola? Newsflash, I don't think many Americans did die of Ebola, but it was the big pandemic scare of 2014, which I covered extensively at the time. I'll put links back to my work on that topic at the time. But in the wake of that, in April of 2015, Bill Gates wrote an op-ed, essentially, in the New England Journal of Medicine called The Next Epidemic, Lessons from Ebola, which was part of this pandemic, panic, freak-out public relations campaign that he was on at the time. And that article includes a very telling paragraph. It's instructive to compare our preparations for epidemics with our preparations for another sort of global threat: war. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, has a mobile unit that it is ready to deploy quickly. Although the system is not perfect, NATO countries participate in joint exercises in which they work out logistics, such as how fuel and food will be provided, what language they will speak, and what radio frequencies will be used. Few, if any, such measures are in place for response to an epidemic. The world does not fund any organization to manage the broad set of coordinated activities required in an epidemic. The last serious simulation of an epidemic in the United States, the Dark Winter Exercise, took place in 2001, and few countries have met their commitments under the international health regulations which were adopted by the United Nations after the 2002-2003 outbreak of the Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome, SARS, and were intended to improve the world's ability to prevent and contain outbreaks. So many important nuggets just in that paragraph alone, one of which is the Dark Winter Exercise, which, as Bill Gates notes, took place in 2001. And if you are unfamiliar with the Dark Winter Exercise, boy, it is time to get up to speed on that. I have talked about it in the past, but like a lot of this work, many, many years in the past, so you may not have seen it. But that was a simulation of an anthrax bioterror scare in the United States, shortly before 9/11 and the anthrax attacks of October 2001, almost as if they were live simulating something that they were about to do. Almost. What an amazing coincidence. Extremely interesting, and you should take a look at that exercise and the fact that it contained faux news reports that were dressed up to look like real news reports about how the anthrax was spreading and how it was affecting different populations. Again, some of the very people responding to the October 2001 anthrax crisis sitting there at the tabletop exercise in 2001. Also, of course, wartime footing. We need a wartime footing for pandemic response, and that is something that's popping up in the news as I speak. Emergency war powers that have not been invoked since the Korean War, for example, in the case of the United States, are being invoked right now because we are at war once again, this time with a hidden enemy. Where have we heard that type of rhetoric before? And again, invoking the specter of SARS, the coronavirus. Of course, now we're dealing with SARS-CoV-2, the electric boogaloo. So a lot of things go back to this. It's an important article for people to read through to understand the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and their angle on this, the philanthropic organizations who are going to help to coordinate the international global response that will be necessary. This is, of course, what it always comes back to, because some people are saying this is the end of globalization as we've known it. This is going to upend everything. On the contrary, this is a fail-forward event in which the very globalist purveyors of the globalist ideology are going to push even further and even harder. We're going to need a global pandemic response agency that's going to be funded by all countries and is going to be able to subsume the national sovereignty of any given country as a result of what's happening right now. And that was, again, laid out by Bill Gates 5 years ago. They're going to try to confuse the public with it, and mission accomplished, because 99% of the public could not tell the difference and has no idea what's going on. And here's how it's rolled out. It's rolled out in the midst of an international emergency, economic emergency, at the very least, let alone other types of emergencies, to the point where most people won't even know what's going on until it's already instituted. And then suddenly, oh, I'm getting money in this digital wallet. Okay, oh, well, this is how we spend it. And what is the ultimate effect of this as these ideas work their way into the economy? Because as James Evan Pilato and I said in that New World Next Week episode, it may not happen in this particular round of crisis, but the idea is now injected into the language. It's in the legislature. It's working its way through the system. It will come forward eventually in some form or other. And what's the plan then? What's the big deal? What's the beef? Well, of course, the Fed will be happy to inject the UBI or the stimulus or the coronavirus relief money or whatever it is as we plunge into the Greatest Depression and things get worse and worse and you rely more and more from this manna from heaven. And, Well, yeah, I mean, we can't just give everyone just free money. You have to, obviously, there are strings attached. I mean, for example, you're going to be a good citizen, right? You're going to abide by all the rules and regulations that we put down. You're going to, of course, observe the quarantines and the self-isolation orders. And oh, yeah, I mean, eventually, there's going to be digital certificates to prove that you got the vaccine when the vaccine comes out. I mean, because of course, in order to be a good citizen and to interact in society, you're going to have the vaccine. So you take the vaccine and then you can get your money. And if you think that this is crazy talk, well, tell that to Bill Gates. Yes, in case you missed it, Bill Gates, Mr. Pandemic, who's been pimping the pandemic panic for the last 5 years now on the record, has recently, well, been everywhere. I'm sure you've seen more of Bill Gates in the past few weeks than you have in the past few years, or perhaps in the past decade, because he's the man of the hour. This billionaire computer guy is suddenly in charge of global public health? Wait, what? Well, he is a billionaire. I guess he must know what he's talking about, right? And in his recent Reddit AMA, which of course received all sorts of accolades from the Reddit community, because, you know, that's the homepage of the internet, right? He responded to one question by saying, the question of which businesses should keep going is tricky. Certainly food supply and the health system. We still need water, electricity, and the internet. Simple supply chains for critical things need to be maintained. Countries are still figuring out what to keep running. Eventually, we will have some digital certificates to show who has recovered or been tested recently, or when we have a vaccine, who has received it. And oh yeah, by the way, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, that wonderful philanthropy, money from heaven, out of nowhere, which is so concerned about getting those global population numbers down with vaccines, don't think about it too hard, are also looking into technologies for, you know, digital IDs and tattoos, electronic tattoos that can be implanted with vaccines. You know, just different ideas for how we can quickly in a scan just tell if you've received your shot, and if so, then maybe we could tie that to the stimulus payment. Do you understand? Every step of this is another step towards the complete lockdown of the economy, the ultimate nightmare of the cashless society that I have been talking about for over a decade. It all comes together in this. It's truly nightmare. It's truly nightmare. And people are starting to get their heads around it with the idea, okay, so there will be a social credit score, and it will be linked to such things as, have you received your vaccine, or have you broken your quarantine order, self-isolation orders, or have you done this, have you done that, and that will be linked to your stimulus payments as the economy collapses around and you lose your job. And it does not take a particularly imaginative person to see where things go from here. They are already going into place. It's just a question of whether that happens during this crisis or the next round, because, as I've said before, this is not the end of the story. This is just the beginning of this particular chapter in the scare. Oh, it's another season. Oh, coronavirus is coming back around. Oh, it looks like a new novel virus is developing in China or Mexico or wherever they say, and you better lock down again, and here it comes again, and how can we prepare for the next pandemic? And I do not see an end to this anytime in the near future, and if you're being honest with yourself, neither do you. This is just the beginning.